Good morning. Craig Howard here. Just want to share a couple minutes with you, and I'm using my phone today because I'm in kind of a rush. I need to get to the hospital. I have an appointment for an MRI this morning, and having some trouble with my back. So I'm going to be there today, and I can transfer things a little more quickly if I just do it on the phone. But I wanted to share a thought with you today that I've come across in my studies. In my Sunday school class, we're studying the book of First Corinthians, and yesterday we started looking at chapter 4. We looked at the fourth chapter, and I came across something that I don't normally double up. I don't normally stuff that I do at the church. I don't normally do on here because I don't want, for the people that may be in my class that might be watching this. It's like, oh, we just studied that yesterday. But this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 carries some really, really important truths that I think we need to hear. It's talking about the difference between the world's perspective and the Christian's perspective, and how the world acts and what the world thinks is important and what we as believers consider to be important. And I think sometimes we forget that there's a distinction, and that the way God sees things and the way God does things is very different than the way the world sees things, and the way the world does things and the priorities the world has. And one of the areas is in the way we treat one another, in the way we care for one another. It's about, in the ancient world, well, really in every age, people are concerned with basically five things. They're concerned with life and death, and then they're concerned with the world's things, and then they're concerned with the present and the future. And the world's things includes things like the accumulation of wealth, possessions, position, prestige, those kinds of things. God has a very different take on things. We get caught up in life and death, how I want to live as long as I can, and we forget that we're created to be eternal. But then we get caught up in little things that cause disputes among us. And he really comes down on that in the fourth chapter. In the sixth verse of the fourth chapter, he says, "Now these things, brethren, I have figuratively transferred to myself and Apollos for your sakes, that you may learn in us not to think beyond what is written." In other words, he says, don't start writing your own script here. Don't start thinking that I can just, because this is the way I feel, this is what I want to do, because somebody has treated me this way, we can start adding to what is acceptable. And then he goes on to say that none of you may be puffed up on behalf of one against the other. He said, never begin to start seeing yourselves as better than somebody else. Never start seeing yourselves as somebody more important than somebody else. Don't get puffed up over somebody else. I don't care whether you are, I don't care, he was talking here, there was a dispute going on between which was the better preacher, whether it was Paul or whether it was Apollos, or, just who was the best preacher. And he says, you know what? There's no one that's better than the other. Don't get puffed up. Now, does that mean maybe somebody isn't more interesting to listen to or interesting to watch? But you know what I found out? I found out that people who like to listen to maybe my style of preaching, there's somebody else, they don't like to listen to somebody else, but there's somebody else over here that has a completely different style of preaching, and somebody likes to listen to them and likes the way they teach and the way they preach, and they wouldn't like me. And so, I never get too puffed up. I never begin to think, I am somehow better. I'm a better preacher than this person, or that person's a better preacher than me, or I'm smarter than that person, Paul says, don't get puffed up. Don't start putting one ahead of the other. Don't start thinking one is better than the other or more important than the other or anything like that. He said, understand that that God has a way of looking at us in his own eyes, and he's created each one of us just the way he wants us. He says, for who makes you differ from another? And what do you have that you did not receive? He says, anything you have, God gave it to you anyhow. Now, if you did indeed receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it? In other words, he said, why do you get puffed up thinking that somehow you did this, that God didn't give it to you, that you earned this, or you made this, or you created this? He says, the things that we lift one another up over another person, the things that lifts one person over another person in some people's eyes, he said that came from God anyhow. So that person doesn't have any right to boast over it or think that somehow they're better, because he said it was given to them by God. The point I'm trying to make, and it's hard to cram an hour or more's worth of study into 5 minutes, and I'm already over 5 minutes. I'm over 6 minutes now. The thing I'm getting at is, today, don't begin to see yourself as better than somebody else. Don't begin to lift yourself up beyond somebody else. Don't begin to think, look at what I've done. Look at how great I am. Look at what I've accomplished. That rooster thinks he's pretty proud. I guess what I'm trying to get at is this. We can look at life through the world's view of things that says, I've got to keep getting better than other people. I've got to keep promoting myself beyond other people. And I'm going to go ahead and record this. I record, usually on most mornings, I record 2 segments. I record a 5-minute segment that I put on Facebook, and then I record a 10-minute or more segment that I put on YouTube, because the YouTube segments need to be over 10 minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and record one 10-minute segment, and I'm going to put it on both today. So you got to put up with 10 minutes of me. I'm sorry. But the point I'm trying to get at with this is, there oftentimes is a competition in the Christian world. And we think this church is better than that church. This preacher is better than that preacher. That's what caused the division in the church at Corinth. Some of them said, I'm going to follow Paul. Some of them said, I'm going to follow Apollos. And I don't understand it. I run into this sometimes in working with pastors in the community, where this pastor doesn't want to work with this group of pastors, because what it boils down to is they don't want to promote another church where somebody may go to their church somebody may go to another church instead of their church. You know what? I've had a lot of people over the years that have come to Break and have been there for a period of time, sometimes for years, and then have gone on to another church because they reached a place in their life where what they needed to learn was coming from a different place. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay. As long as they're involved in the work of the Lord, as long as they're involved in church, it hurts me. I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt when somebody leaves and goes to another church, but I understand that sometimes we grow in a different place, or we need to go in a different direction. Sometimes it's because of something that happens with family or whatever. But when it happens, as long, we're not in competition with one another. It's not a competition. We're all reaching for the same goal, and that's to make disciples. That is to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, to make disciples. And when churches begin to bicker back and forth, when Christians begin to bicker back and forth, when Christians start lifting this one up over that one and saying this is better than that one, that's the world's way of looking at things. That's the way the world does. The world is all about competition, and you've got to be better than this one and all that kind of stuff. That's the world's way. God says, don't look at things the same way the world looks at things. Instead, look at things the way God looks at things. And the way God looks at things is He wants God's people to work together for a common cause, to reach as many people as we can with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So today, my challenge to you is, don't start getting puffed up. Don't allow things to happen in your church or in your life that separate you from other believers. Don't start looking at other believers and other churches the way the world does. Don't start looking at life the way the world does, that says, I want to achieve as much prestige as I can. I want as much possession. I want as much wealth as I can get. I want all of these things don't start looking at life that way. Because when we do, when that's the way we look at life, then the only one that wins is Satan. Because it causes Christians to separate. It causes us to start competing. It causes us to start, instead of working together to reach as many people as we can with the gospel of Christ, it causes us to actually separate, and that weakens us, and we stop being as effective for Christ as we could be. Paul said, look, things are going to happen that are going to hurt you. Verse 12, what was it? Here it goes. He says, we labor working with our own hands. Being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we endure. Being defamed, we entreat. We have been made the filth of the world, basically for the gospel of Jesus Christ. There are things that try to separate God's people in this world. He says, when those things come, just let them roll off. We're persecuted, we endure. What matters is the gospel of Christ. Today, work real hard to look at things through Christ's eyes and be blessed. I got to go. I'm already long. I'm 11 and a half minutes. I'll talk to you later. God bless you.